Hey, friends, and welcome to Lucy Smiles Living Room podcast. I am your host, Diane Lozo, also known as Lucy Smiles. And as we enter into season 2 of the Lucy Smiles Living Room podcast, I am so blessed and honored to sit in the living room today with a friend of mine that I have not yet known for at least a year. And whenever I met Guy, also known as Tru, and we've got a few names such as myself, so we're very familiar with the different names that came into both of our lives at different times in our lives. Whenever we met at an event just last fall, there was such an energy that came to us. And as Tru was sharing his story, I just thought this is something that more than just myself and my small group of women friends needed to hear. So I just wanted to say thank you for saying yes to coming on the show today, Tru.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate that.
I'm so excited. So whenever I met you and we were sitting in circle at a beautiful event, it was called The New Human. So I actually met you as I decided to fly up from Mexico to Vancouver to an event. And it really reminds me of my tagline for the show, which is follow the magic that ignites your inner essence. And as I was invited in to attend this event, not having a clue what it was about, I just followed my own magic. And sometimes, if not many times, when we are asked to follow the magic in our lives, there's no logic. So I would love to open up this conversation with you around sharing your story. And Tru, who is such a beautiful transformational storyteller, is also a musician and a songwriter. As a shiatsu specialist of over 30 years, also has worked with psychodramatic body work as a facilitator and also a core process practitioner. So all of those things, all of those beautiful offerings that you give, I would love to touch on where did it all begin? So where did the story of you as Guy come in and that true essence come into you where your new energy vibration of Tru came through, and how did that all begin? You can start anywhere.
Okay. Well, my challenge always when I'm sharing a story about my own life is how to keep it short.
Because we're not in a rush today, so bring it.
But in any case, I thought I'd start by saying the journey as I experienced it, and then as it spoke to me throughout life, over and over again in a number of different ways. I kind of came to the conclusion that we came into this life with a broken heart, and because we forget where we came from when we get here. And so we spend the rest of our lives kind of trying to figure out what the heck is this all about and why am I here and so on. So my story kind of began, I was born to two blind parents in the 1950s, and they were dealing with, of course, all of the challenges that would come with that. And considering that they also had six kids, I was the fifth of 6 kids. And then just to share a little bit, I'm trying through what I'm going to share here is to give a bit of a context of what took me down the path, the number of paths that I've gone down, and where it directed me in terms of my purpose or my sense of meaning and mission for being here. And that is that around when I was still with my parents, around when I was around 6 years old or so, I used to go to, because when my father married my mother, he could still see it somewhat, and then he went blind and then became an alcoholic, and more abuse was taking place in the home and all that sort of thing. So I used to go to this alley to get away from the chaos, and then one day out of the blue, a man showed up and basically put a gun to my head and forced me to do some sexual stuff, and it was so traumatic at the time that I actually lost my memory for 2 or 3 years, and then shortly thereafter, I was put into foster homes, and so I went through roughly something like, I don't know, I tend to forget all the numbers, but it was roughly around 9 foster homes until I was about 15, 16 years old when I basically started living on my own. And so the reason why I started out by saying we all sort of come into this world with a broken heart, and part of what directs our passion for certain things is the journey towards healing that. And so where it ended up taking me was that I just became very, very interested in truth and knowledge and wisdom. And so I began to get involved with helping while I was still in high school. I opened up a halfway house. It was called the House of Philemon, and it was based on helping kids on the street and various people like bikers and stuff. And it was financially supported by the United Church. I was shortly after my involvement with the house, I became a lay minister in the United Church and so on, and did that for while I finished high school, and then just as I was heading out to go to university, I ended up leaving the church because of a funny story. I was infatuated with a lovely young lady in high school, and she was exploring things like the tarot and all that sort of thing, and he interpreted it all as being, "Ooh, that's from the devil," and so you can't see her anymore. And of course, my youthful enthusiasm and passion just said, "Well, no, sorry, I'm out of here." I think there's more answers to life than some of how it's being interpreted for me. And so that took me on a big journey, and I basically went to 2 universities, and I studied what I loved to study. I didn't go to get a degree particularly, but I spent about 4 years studying all these things I loved to explore, everything from mythology to psychology to literary studies, the evolution of consciousness, all of these types of things. And so that ended up taking me into working as a childcare worker in a boys' home. And then anyway, it was a street work with Toronto Youth Services. I was working with kids on the street, and then eventually I got involved with studying shiatsu, and had a practice for about 30 years or more, combining it with body. I would call it body psychotherapy. So it would be, correlating the way in which the organs express various emotions in the body and so on. And so when I was doing psychodramatic body work, I was working with a team of 10 people, and we would do a continuum. We were working, it was a 4-day retreat that we would do, and it was with doctors and therapists and artists and everyday people, and it was all on dealing with traumas and the idea of becoming released from these traumas, where people are trying to reach their potential, but every time they would move towards that potential, they would encounter some of the shadow aspects that were still haunting them, and so they couldn't move forward. And so the idea of the psychodramatic body work was to release these traumatic areas so that people could begin to express what they haven't been able to express. And in psychodramatic body work, it's done where the audience becomes the auxiliaries to the story that the person shares. So there's 2 versions of the story. The first version is the story that is traumatic. And to give you an example, there was one example of a woman who lost everybody in her family through the Auschwitz and through all of that, and was still very much stuck in terms of being able to move forward. And so we would do this continuum in the morning before people would be arriving, and we would, each one of us on the continuum in the group would choose where we were at that particular day on the continuum in terms of anger, fear, and sorrow. We would say, where are we today? And so some people would say, "Oh, I'm passive aggressive." Other people would say, "Oh, I'm totally enraged," and so on. And so we would give examples of these states to the people attending, in order to build a trust that they would then feel safe in being able to share their stories. And what we shared was not something we were just making up. We were actually being fully authentic in terms of what was our story, what we were struggling with as well. So anyway, that was just one example. Then it took me into, a whole bunch of things. My spiritual work, I ended up living for a time in an Anglican monastery and a short time in a Zen monastery. I spent time studying in a mystery school for a few years. So all of this has taken me into a perception of this need for the heart and the mind to find unity, and
Mhm.
that there can be this unified field that takes place, because the tendency in all the work that I've been doing um, is that we tend to not um, want to look at those aspects of ourselves that are actually pushing us to expand into something so much greater,
Wow.
and so we're more comfortable with what's familiar.
Yeah.
So this, yeah. So go ahead.
Yeah, I was just thinking too because I've been taking time to listen to your beautiful music and the messages
Mm,
that come from your music, and I would say the core alignment with all of them is love. And there was one quote in one of the songs that you have called Love Again, and it says that the only way to reach our hearts is to name what keeps us apart.
mm.
And so it sounds like that's the work that you had done with the body work and the core processing. So can you also share before we get into your music and love is for those that may not be familiar with shiatsu or specifically like was it psychodramatic body work or core process facilitating?
Mm.
What does that mean? It's unfamiliar to me, those types
Yes,
of
yeah.
well, shiatsu is not unfamiliar to me, but I've yet to understand exactly how the function of that support. So can you share that for those that may be interested in learning more about that specifically?
Okay. Well, I explained a little bit of
Yeah.
psychodramatic body work in terms
Yeah.
of how it takes place and when we're focusing. One of
Mhm.
the roles I was serving in doing that work was I would stimulate various acupuncture points in the
Mhm.
body, the ones associated with grief and anger and all that. And then, because generally what I would discover is that people would be very hesitant, of course, to be seen letting all of this energy out. And so part of what I was doing was actually getting them to, if it was about anger, getting them pissed off enough that they would react, and then we
Yeah.
would be able to work with that. And I would bring in a tackle dummy as well, so people could beat
Wow.
the
Yeah.
with the tackle dummy, so on. So that was that work. Uh, the the core process work is a work I've been certified in. My mentor in Toronto is Addie Kanda, and she has a site called World Without Fear,
Wow.
which is also on Facebook,
Okay.
and it also has a website of its own. And she's been doing this work. She channels these stories that become stories of the shadow aspect of a person's life. And
Mhm.
um, so I studied with her for a couple of years and got trained in being able to channel these stories. And basically, what happens is I go into a bit of a meditative state, and then um, I basically start to respond to whatever is rising up into my awareness. Usually it's images, and then I just follow the images, and then the images start to unravel a story.
Wow.
And then many times my ego mind
Mm.
comes in and says, "You're not going to say that," and I'd have to tell it to go for lunch, and I'll talk to it
Right.
later. And
A long lunch.
yeah. So so it's a real trust exercise. Anytime I do it, in fact, next week I'm giving a reading to someone who's been really struggling with some stuff, and so
Oh.
it's I always say it's always a challenge for me. It's a little scary because I have to completely step into trust and
Mhm.
surrender, and of course, people are paying for the service, so you want to be sure. I want to be sure that they're going to find benefit from it. And
Mhm.
so, but I never know what's going to come through, so it's always one of
Mhm.
those fascinating experiences, and I've been amazingly surprised so many times by what people say when they come back and they say, "Oh, it was that moment when you said that particular thing," and everything else.
Mhm.
So the way that works is that I give this story. It takes about an hour. It gets recorded. I send it to them, and then we have three follow-up sessions, 1 hour sessions. And I basically encourage the person to listen to the story every day or two, and then
Mhm.
to journal immediately after or during while they're listening to the story. And just to do that for 2 weeks, and then we do our first session, follow-up session. And all I
Okay.
do is I just come on and I just go, so how's it going? I mean, you've been
Mhm.
listening to the story, what's coming up? And then they
Right.
start to share, and then it triggers things in me to point fingers different ways, but not to actually give answers. It's more
Right.
kind of more inquiry. The whole thing is a
Mhm.
search. And it's had some amazing, I mean, there's one beautiful example of a woman who is a painter, and she had painted like many, like dozens of paintings, but never completed any of them. And then she had a core reading, not from me, but actually from Addie.
Mhm.
And she it completely changed her whole life. She went and completed all of those paintings
Wow.
after she, so there was a shadow aspect that was holding her back. So whether
Yeah.
it was self-judgment or whatever, and so on. So yeah.
It's amazing that you say that too, because as I'm hearing you, it makes sense to me, like maybe not from the logical, but from the mystical and the spiritual frequency of I love the fact that you said that there's also going to be the integration because again, we can go to therapy or we can go to a medicine circle or whatever that looks like for us. But the most important thing in my experience is how are we integrating it? Because when you have a session with your client and you're channeling information that could maybe even shock them a little bit,
Mhm.
it's amazing because what happens is I'm sure is that it takes them some journaling, a couple of days, even a couple of weeks for things to come in that they may not have been ready during the session itself. And so that integration period is probably the most significant part of the healing. And having said that, Tru, I also wanted to ask you because again, not everyone understands certain things like in terms of say shadow work. So we hear shadow work it's a thing, right? For the last several years, perhaps depending on the spaces that you're in and where you're operating. So can you share with people who are listening who may be confused, like what is shadow work? Can you explain that in a way that can just resonate with the audience around like what is shadow work? How do you work with it? And what does that actually mean?
Well, what comes to mind immediately in being able to kind of describe shadow work is I got an image that just came into my head, which is think of you standing and the sun is shining on your face, and 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 so you look out at the world based on the light that you typically see and that's shining upon you, and you're standing in front of a wall, and at the back behind you is your shadow that you don't
Mm.
see. And
Wow.
it's been said that our conscious life is the life that we can see around us. We can identify all the details of our life and say, I can see that. I can see that that's represents where I have arrived in my consciousness and in my life. But what we don't see is our subconscious life. And the one way in which that comes into our view, in fact, probably the most profound way that it comes into our view, is when other people point out our subconscious self.
Hmm.
When they say to us, "Oh, I'm seeing this, I'm feeling this," and of course, it's always up to you to decide whether what they're saying is accurate or not accurate, if you
Right.
resonate with it. But basically, and we've all experienced this, that someone comes into our life in a particular moment, they end up sharing something with us, and they end up seeing something in us that we didn't see, that we couldn't see, and they share something about that, and then next thing you know, it actually opens up our life in a really
Mhm.
beautiful way, and we find
Yeah.
ourselves expanding. So essentially, that is the shadow work is looking at what it is that you cannot see and that has
Mhm.
actually been in your way
Mhm.
and holding you back, specifically in terms of your joy, your potential, your capacity to be intimate with life, with yourself, with a relationship. So
Mhm.
it really is, it's the things you cannot see. It's the shadow that's on the wall behind you. And
Right.
so and the process of doing shadow work is just to bring it into the light
Right.
and to reveal its teaching, because all shadows reveal a gift.
Mm. I love that. It takes the fear away from doing the work, maybe.
Yes, 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 yes.
Because I think what I'm hearing from you that resonates with me is that you're working with tools that help to activate something that is hidden. And so those tools allow that activation. And then once it's activated, then the integration would come in for the gifts. And it's and doing it with love. And I feel like doing it with compassion for ourselves, that we don't try to create dis-ease in our life. And we're not trying to create dis-ease, or duality in the lives of others through relationship. And so the gift is the shadow work. And the gift is being able to know that it's like a key to a door. It's not a negative aspect of ourselves, but it's actually that key where the activation integration can create that gift to come out. And then now we are able to shine that light that was holding us back. My question for you also then, to go back to your own trauma, you had mentioned the trauma that you had within that experience, and that you had lost your memory for a couple of years. Did obviously it came back. How did you come to a place of remembering? And what did that maybe look like for you? Because that could have been quite traumatic as well as the trauma.
Great question. Great question. Yeah. Um, hmm, hmm. To basically, the trauma opened a door to why I'm here.
Mm.
And of course, I didn't realize that for many years. I had to go and do my own healing work and so on. But just point out the question a little bit more to me.
Right. So you had lost memory from trauma. And so
Right.
as we're talking about the shadow work, I was just curious how your memory came back. What did that look like? And how are you able to also integrate that? Because that's quite a trauma to remember something like that, with the shock.
Yeah, and actually, to tell you the truth, I haven't completely gotten all of that memory back.
Right.
There's especially afterwards, like immediately afterwards, I can remember the moment, but
Mm-hmm.
but not much even of that. Just like
Mm-hmm.
it's almost like a flash, and
Mm-hmm.
then yeah. But it's interesting to in the question. I think that's why I was kind of really thinking about it, which is that this idea of remembrance.
Mm-hmm.
When I was in the mystery school in the Gurdjieff work, the primary motto of in that work was always and everywhere remember yourself.
Wow.
And so and for years when I was studying in that school, of course I was asking the question, what self is it that I'm trying to remember? And it's been said many times, we have many eyes within us, many
Mm-hmm.
personalities, many different ways in which we see ourselves, right? And but we are so driven by stimulus response that we end up forgetting actually who we actually really are, because we're reacting to life most of the time. In fact, one of the statements in the Gurdjieff work was that we were stimulus response mechanisms, that we are literally like automatons. And we can certainly see this in the world when we see some of the most recent worldwide events where everyone went into lock and step, in which people were not necessarily fully present to their own discernment, and as a result, we're listening to other people's interpretation of what to discern, and so this is where we end up losing ourselves, because we end up trusting what someone else is saying to be the truth of who we are and what we're experiencing, when in fact we might be experiencing it very differently. And but we tend to give the authority over to things outside of ourselves. And
I totally agree. It's interesting because, as you had said too, we're always still in the process of evolution and progressing through our own personal growth and spiritual growth. And I couldn't agree more, because even to most recently in my own life, no matter how much, I've been learning about myself and building that self-awareness, is sometimes I will still find myself saying, do I actually think that, or am I thinking that I should think that of that? And it's I'm able to catch myself though, and still sometimes I don't even have the answer. I'm like, I don't know. Do I? What do I really think about that? Because the influence that we have, or the well, it is. It's just that the influence around us, and I believe when I think about how can I better understand my own thoughts and feelings on things, is really to get back into meditation. And so that's something for me where I will notice if I fall back on whatever meditation is for me, like more quiet moments, more longer walks with the dogs, going to the ocean or sitting in silence, not staring at my phone right away. I realize that the more I disconnect from the silence, the more heavily influenced I can be to not realize my own thoughts versus adopting the thoughts or feelings or emotions or trauma of other people. So I totally agree with
Yeah,
you.
yeah. And I was, in response to that, I would say too that truth. And this is a general statement as I experience it and relate to it, which is truth is direct. It does not go into debate.
Mm. Wow.
Truth truth is like an arrow going for the bullseye,
Yeah.
um, and the way that we tap into the truth um, is we have to feel it,
Mhm.
and we have to feel what the truth is, and
Mhm.
then the mind will begin to do whatever it does, because the mind's function is about organization and categorization and compartmentalization and logic and all that sort of a thing, right? But when it's an affair of the heart, when it is an issue of the heart in particular, it is the wisdom of the heart that is required in order for the mind to then become in service to the heart. But the tendency when the mind gets excited and takes off in reacting to what you're feeling, it can come up with all kinds of crazy interpretations
Yeah.
of what those feelings are saying to you. And if those feelings are connected to something that's really deeply connected to what it is that you're afraid to look at, or the shadow aspect of something, um, well, then we live a shadow life. We end up living a life in which we show one side of ourselves, while there's another side of ourselves that's dearly protected. And
Mhm.
um, only when I'm willing to. So, for example, like, to move into the heart requires, as I've been experiencing it, it requires deep trust, and it requires the capacity to really surrender.
Yeah.
Um, and it's not a surrender of acquiescence where I give my power away. It's a surrender in which I become more attentive. I surrender to the truth of what's taking place and allow that truth to speak to the heart of my own needs and my own sense of direction and purpose and so on. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but
I'm feeling mesmerized right now. You're making so much sense in my heart, so much heart sense, because I
mm,
was thinking about even this morning, and I love that you said that, like, not, acquiescing. So this morning as well, I was sharing with you before we went live around a meditation that I was doing, that I love, and I'll put it in the definitely going to put it in the show notes because I share it with everyone. And as I was doing it, you put yourself in a state of gratitude. I Right as soon as I opened my eyes to look at something, like not seeking outside of me for an answer, but seeking from within myself for the answer, something just showed up. And the only thing that I felt was super high frequency, and it was undeniable. And
mm,
so it was undeniable that when, as you'd mentioned, when the ego starts to take over, it was too late. Like,
mm,
you're too
mm,
late. You're too late.
mm,
It's too undeniable. So it's just in that, I think that that's what it is the instant serendipity that happens, whereas no matter what the ego wants to do, it showed up too late to the party. So I love that feeling, and I believe then that as well too, that we all have it in us to see that magic. It's just gifting ourselves the opportunity to put ourselves in a state where it can show up for us to see it as undeniable. And that's where I believe meditation, singing, quiet times, being with animals, being with Mother Nature, whatever that could look like, to activate that, and then allowing us to move through that with that belief that it is possible to walk that state of being completely in that inner self that is us, and not, maybe adopting and feeling like that shadow work taking over, because we all want to live a life of truth, right? No one says, I can't wait to stay in the shadow and create shadow experiences. We're all looking to find that inner sense of joy and that inner sense of peace that comes with being bold enough to be ourselves.
Yeah, so much of the shadow stuff has come from a distorted narrative that we've all been raised and brought up in this world, a world of competition, a world of dominance, a world of war, a war of so much conflict, so much comparison, where we don't accept ourselves unless we can compare ourselves to somebody else that we do accept. So the narrative has caused us to lose the ball of yarn that gets us out of the labyrinth of confusion that most of us are living in this world. And so getting to that place of remembrance is it's actually life in the way that it has spoken to me. Is it's like life. The universe comes down and it whispers in your ear and it says, you got to get intimate, man. You got to get intimate with life. You got to get intimate with yourself. You got to be willing to be present to things. So all of the universe is saying it's not about the past. It's not about the future. It's actually about this particular moment. And what is it that I'm feeling right now? And then what does that feeling generate in my thoughts? And then what do those thoughts cause me to do and to behave in the world? And I can start to, and if I journal where I catalog those three areas of my life, what I think, what I feel, and what I do, if I did that every day and then didn't look at what I wrote after I wrote it, except for maybe 2 weeks down the road or a month down the road, and then I go back and read what I wrote, and when I'm writing it, it's not analysis. It's just what did I feel and what did I do and what did I think, and you just write it down without any censorship, and you'd be amazed at what insights you'll get about yourself after a month of doing that. And
right. So do you recommend journaling and waiting for a couple of weeks to go back? Or are you saying
that particular kind of journaling? Yes.
I love that. It's beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, it was actually put out many years ago in a book called The Writer's Way.
The Artist's Way.
The Artist's Way. That's it.
Yeah. I was going to bring that up because that's what it was, is the morning pages. And so
that's right. Yeah.
And it's funny because I love that book, and I had practiced it with a couple of online book clubs, and I have a couple circles of friends that we stay connected. It was from 4 years ago. So that's a prompting for me as well too, because as you were sharing the beginning part of the work that you do with core processing, and I was thinking that was prompting me to go back to the Artist's Way, because you're just, and it's like 3 pages, there's no judgment. And that really did help me to identify certain things that sometimes, again, you kind of are numb, you brush off, you don't pay attention to it, and then it can just escalate. So you're losing the ball of yarn and you're creating a snowball.
That's right. Yeah.
Makes you a little crazy. So thank you for reminding me of that. Just, it was like, I was thinking about it and then you mentioned it. And so The Artist's Way is a beautiful book to get, or just, buy a beautiful journal, one that you will write in, and taking those moments to do it, whether it's 5 minutes or half an hour a day.
Another aspect. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
No, of course.
But I was just going to say that another thing connected to the journaling is, I'll give an example. One time I was doing the journaling in that way, and I identified an aspect of myself, and so I decided I'd have a conversation with that aspect, and I'm journaling the conversation. So the aspect that I was having the conversation with was the part of me that was the procrastinator. And so I began a conversation with my procrastinator. And so on the page, I'd write down procrastinator. And then after procrastinator, I would have the procrastinator speak. And it would say, so why is it that you're not finishing? Or I would speak and I'd say, hey, how come I'm struggling with finishing things, and you, my procrastinator, you keep coming in and having me put things off, and I'm not getting things done. So what's that all about? and then I would stop, and then I would listen to whatever just immediately came to the surface as a response, and then I'd put my name, and I'd say, okay, so now it's Tru responding, and I'd say, or no, sorry, it would be the procrastinator that would be
Yep.
responding to my
Yep.
statement, and then it would say, oh, it would come through, and it would say, oh, I'm just protecting you,
Mhm.
and I would go, oh, well, what are you protecting me from? And then it would come back, and it would say, oh, I'm protecting you from being disappointed.
Wow, this is brilliant.
And I ended up having this 3-page conversation with my procrastinator. And at the end of the whole 3 pages, we
Yeah.
became the best of friends.
That is brilliant. I'm thinking that that is such a beautiful tool to use because then you're also just having so much more compassion and you're building a relationship. And so it's almost like the stranger or the elephant in the room turns into your best friend and then you can work together. That's just absolutely that's brilliant. That's amazing.
It's
And then
fun.
sometimes you have to say to the procrastinator, if you don't mind, step aside because I actually have to get this done. We could talk about why. We could talk about your emotional trauma around it later. I have a deadline. There's so
That's
many ways to use it, but I love that.
yeah.
I'm actually that's beautiful, and I hope that the audience can take from that. I think it's a beautiful practice.
So I'll
Yeah.
just add, because I haven't said much about the music, but
Yeah, I wanna go right into that.
the music has been um, basically what happened was that I've been through 2 marriages. The second one, which amounted to 32 years of my life, and the second one ended in 2013, and um, and then I decided to. Well, actually, I met a wonderful lady, stayed with her for 2.5 years, and then basically Spirit started speaking to me in dreams and started to say it was my time to go walk about and share my stories and songs with the world, with those that I meet, in order to encourage people's hearts to open more and for there to be more compassion in the world. And so that's what happened around 2016. I left Toronto and completely gave up my possessions. I totally surrendered, trusted the universe, and didn't know where I was going to land or where I was going to end up. And so for the past 9 years or so, I've been basically living in deep trust. And
Mhm.
I have been in reservations and people's homes and yoga studios. And um, even when I got here in Calgary, I ended up being in a home that became a community house called Harmony House, and ran that for like 3 years and so on. So, but when I left Toronto, I literally had surrendered myself to being of service as an ambassador of the heart. And so all of my songs are designed to not only touch the heart, but also to open the mind. And
Mhm.
I've been truly blessed and deeply moved by the fact that many times when I've given a performance, completely unexpectedly, even people who aren't even necessarily even into this kind of music would come up to me, and I've had people weeping in my arms, and uh, basically because something in them had opened up that they hadn't seen or had been avoiding within themselves. And so um, that it's been a magical journey ever since. The songs have become something that is kind of like alchemy. It's like
Yes.
it's music messenger. I've become more like a music messenger in a sense, where it's not just the words, but it's also the music itself, and the timbre of my voice. I guess it has something
Mhm.
to do with it too. So
And it's beautiful because I know that, you have performed in, like, small wellness stores, like my friend that I only found out yesterday that we're mutual friends with, Timmy, out in Calgary, and then also, as I was listening to your beautiful performance, you're also performing in centers with over 600 people, but when I was listening to even that, it felt so intimate, and I
mm.
was looking at the YouTube, like, how many people are in that center? It was just so magical when you were singing Beloved. Can you talk about that as well too? I wanna talk about a couple of things. So, as I'm hearing you gift the audience with your story around surrender, I think about, like, our where are we able to and willing to in our own lives to truly surrender? You hear the word, "I'm just gonna surrender," but, like, when are we really gonna surrender to certain things where we can actually walk through that space of the unknown. And then going back to your beautiful music, it's stunning and it is alchemy. With the song Beloved, you talk more about that because you just created it as you went in front of 600 plus people. So can
Mm.
you talk about what that felt like? Because it is channeling. It's your channeling alchemy that, and then the audience's reaction, which I'm definitely going to put the YouTube in the show notes, was just beautiful. So how did
Mm.
that
Mm.
feel? And that's surrendering for sure in that way as well too. And so how does that come about for you? What are you feeling? What are you sensing when you're providing those beautiful messages for the world?
Well, a number of the songs are designed to touch certain emotions. So it could be grief, it could be sadness, it could be loss, it could be joy. Um, and so I strive to tailor the lyrics and the music to carve a kind of a sacred space within you that you can feel um, things that you haven't that's been layered over that you haven't been feeling, and but also to write it in such a way that it starts to make the mind frame its
Mhm,
interpretation of itself and of the life you've been living. Um, and so you know I find that that when people can feel what they haven't completely come to understand, but they can feel it, that is the direction to go in terms of surrender. And
mhm,
and a big part of that I often say to people is, what gives you joy?
mhm,
We literally we've come here not to live a traumatic life. We've come here to actually celebrate the joy of being alive, and to have such an amazing planet to be living on, and the fact that every living thing on this planet has been put here because of this amazing evolutionary process that we are all going through. And this is the only, from what I understand, this is the only planet that actually has this kind of diversity to it.
mhm.
In terms of this evolution of consciousness that's happening for as little as an ant to a human being. And
Yeah.
so when you stop and think about that, it's like, wow. So surrendering is a process of tapping into where your joy is, what actually makes you feel good in
Mhm.
life. You know,
Yeah.
is it? And there's a great, and it doesn't have to be some big, profound thing. Like, for myself, I've lived. I would say I've lived a very, um, what's the word? Uncommon life, but simple. Like I don't have any great accolades. I've often said I feel like I've been more down in the trenches, kind of on the street, when boots on the ground kind of thing, and organically. So much of what I do, I'm not a very good promoter of myself in a lot of ways, which is why it's wonderful to be doing this right now.
Awesome.
But and so much of what I do and where I find myself doing things happens very organically, like through
Mhm,
word of mouth, through,
mhm.
and it's so I don't do any kind of big promotional stuff. And so it's even the way that you and I met, Diane. I mean, you're sitting with a group of women in the middle of the walkway.
We took over with our picnic, I'll tell you.
and, I, and then I just sat down and had a nice, lovely
And we
conversation.
invited you for food. It was so beautiful. It
Yeah,
was so beautiful. I'll never forget that moment. It was
yeah.
such a joy, and it is, when I think about that feeling, that was
Mm,
pure joy of
mm,
just connection, heart-centered connection, and that's
yeah.
where the organic magic comes in. And I think that's the most beautiful thing too, because you're bringing in people who are radiating with you, not from
Mm,
this billboard promotion, like come and see True performing, which they do, they'll come anyway. But I think that's just beautiful. Like it's how I met you. And I thought, it was just such a beautiful invitation to hear your story from
mm.
connecting heart to heart frequency. It was amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and yeah, so surrendering to your joy, surrendering to whatever it is that makes you feel alive, like makes you feel
Mhm.
excited about life. And the other thing that I really strive very much to emphasize with people is, we are creator beings. we are at one with the Creator, and we have the power to create pretty much almost anything. And all we have to do is look at our history and what we have done. It's pretty phenomenal. I mean,
Yeah.
we have a huge capacity for destructive creativity, but we also have this phenomenal capacity for positive creativity. And I think we're moving into a time in which that is what is coming now, is that we are entering into a new age, a new human, a new relationship to what it means to be alive and to be connected to your joy and to your own personal sense of self. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I agree,
Yeah.
because one of the questions I want to ask you specifically for the audience is, you almost answered the question, but I want to take it a little bit deeper. So, we're aware the last several years have been traumatic and scary and the unknown and also beautiful. The reality is the reality, and also our reality of what is happening is also our dominant thoughts are going to create how we feel, right? Are we
Mhm.
living in a sense of joy? Are we living in a sense of connection, serendipity, alchemy? Or are we living in a sense of fear, disruption, dis-ease, all of which are okay, like it just is natural. So I would love for you to share, because I hear what you're saying and I resonate with you, and I also have so many beautiful friends in my life who also, maybe struggling with witnessing what is outside. And can you share, based on your own alchemy, your own decisions, your own experiences of also having trauma in your life, whether it's global or personal, do you have a message for people to allow them the magic of creating joy no matter what is outside being shown? Because I believe that when we raise our own vibration, we are literally able to create that collective consciousness and the new earth that's happening. And if we, and it's not to judge, but like just to honor people, to say like, you're allowed to raise your vibration regardless of what's going on, so that you can come with us and build that new creation up, build that new human globe that we are creating, so that we can come together as a team regardless of what we're seeing that may not look like a team effort or something where it's, you know, um, aligned with our highest good. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean,
People are struggling with,
yeah.
maybe they don't go to the new human like we do, right? So like when I went there, I was like, this is for me to raise my vibration. So it's important with your environment, what you're learning, who you're surrounding yourself with. But sometimes it can get scary if you're not attached to, like, yours and my connection and the women that I was there with and the speakers on stage who were like teaching us how to be in our essence.
Hmm. So sorry, what was there a question in there?
Yeah, so I know. So can you enlighten the audience on ways that they can move through raising their own frequency regardless of what they're seeing on the outside that may look like disruption?
Hmm. Well, again, the word discernment comes to mind big time. And the old biblical reference of separating the wheat from the chaff.
Mhm.
So the idea is, who is really talking? Like when
Yeah.
I hear that voice in my head, who is speaking? Is it me that's speaking, or is it someone else that told me this, or some other voice in my life?
Mhm.
So discerning who is authoring, who's actually speaking in any given moment, um, is is part of the the journey of discernment, which is because we've taken so much to be truth that is not truth,
Right.
and so we to unravel that is, I mean, it can be a really complicated process because of our attachments and all the ways in which we become attached to how we feel, and then
Mhm.
the judgments we place on all of those things. So, and if we go too much into the mind about it, it becomes convoluted, and we end up choking on our own attempts to try to understand in different ways. But
Mhm.
but to tap into what actually gives you a feeling that says this feels right, this feels good,
Mhm.
um, you know, and then to seek that out in any given moment, like when you're doing something, when you're working at your job, does this feel good? I mean, I'm in this relationship, does this feel good? Is this something that that I can actually work with, that honors me too, right? And so
Mhm.
discernment becomes a big part of this, and that's why awareness is so central. I mean, we talk meditation and all that sort of thing, and that's
Mhm.
the reason why it's, I mean, what I love about Richard Rudd's work is that he makes this emphasis of the difference between concentration, meditation, and contemplation. It was one of the reasons why I was really drawn to his work, besides all of the amazing information that he's put in the gene keys.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
still learning a lot about that. It's fascinating to me, and it's university grade, and I feel like I'm in kindergarten when it comes to the gene
right,
keys.
it is. Yeah,
So
it's
it's
rich.
beautiful. So
Very.
yeah, I'm interested in digging more deep into his work.
So one of the things I loved about it is because this is probably the way that I function, and from what you were describing earlier, Diane, in terms of your multiple ways of meditating, is is that that's I think this is similar to you as well, which is that Richard Rudd emphasizes contemplation,
Mm.
concentration, and meditation. Even though in meditation you don't really want to have a goal, but the tendency, of course, is I want to become enlightened through
Yeah.
meditation. So there is a certain intention for it to accomplish a goal.
Yeah.
And of course, concentration comes with anything that we have to concentrate on, technical information, all that sort of thing, right? But contemplation is where I'm not holding too tightly to anything.
Mhm.
I'm experiencing something going through my body, through my feelings, and I give it my attention. I become present to it. I don't. The most important thing is we can't, like, because of having blind parents. I often use the example. You cannot change what you cannot see.
Hmm.
And so, like with my mother, she arranged the whole house so that she could walk through it as if she could see. And
Hmm.
so she rarely ever bumped into anything. Um, so um, what we are seeing in our life, whether or not we are actually aware as to whether or not that is a choice we actually have made, or whether it's a choice that's been made for us through our subconscious mind, just subconsciously deciding to go that way, through the way
Mhm.
in which society coerces us to think along certain lines, narrative lines. So to get to this place of really surrendering to who you are, to your authentic self, it really is asking the question, who is talking right now?
Yeah.
Who is the author of these words that I'm saying, that I'm speaking? Who is it that is telling me to do this particular thing? And it's a bit of a Sherlock Holmes experience, and where but the simplicity in it is that when I am fully present to whatever's there, say it's frustration because I can't figure this out, right? So I sit with frustration, and and if you can write about frustration, that would be cool, because then you could say, okay, what does frustration feel like? What does it taste like? What does it look like? What
Mhm.
color would it be? Um, when we flesh out something that is invisible, we make it we make that thing that's invisible come alive, and
Right.
it gives us a perspective that
Mhm.
allows us to see something that we're not so close to.
I love that, because as you're sharing this scenario, I'm picturing this. This is what comes to me. So tell me if this I don't want to say makes sense, because then we're going to logic when that's the ego saying, I want to make sense of it. No. So when you're sharing this, I'm picturing myself, the words that come up was witnessing. So just witnessing something rather than being it. And then I was picturing myself sitting with. So I'm going to sit on the sofa. I'm going to call in to sit with. So sitting with compassion, and then also saying, so who is sitting here right now? Share with me, who is it? Is it frustration, procrastination, anger, scarcity, fear? And then saying, okay, well, and tell me what that looks like, right? And so then you're actually, I love that. It feels good to be able to say, I'm going to sit with the part of me that wants to show up and just listen, not judge, not say you shouldn't, not say that's not fair, because what happens is that, and again, it's almost, it makes sense to me from a heart's perspective, is what we fight against that we don't want to bring up. That's when it starts to get worse and worse, and then the snowball happens. But if we would sit with it, and maybe even journal, like, tell me, I'll write some notes for you. It just brings that whole perspective into a different light where we can have compassion for ourselves. And maybe in those moments, things can be shared that we would be shocked, that allow us to work through the shadow work.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Amazing.
And children and animals actually are great examples for us
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
because I mean, think of a child that's having a temper tantrum, right? And what all that is I just pay attention to me. Give me some attention, right? As soon as that child is given that attention, the temper tantrum goes away. They go off playing as if nothing ever even happened, right?
Mhm.
And I think
Mhm.
and animals are very much like that too. You can come home grumpy and you can yell at your dog and whatever. And then, 5 minutes later, the dog is wagging its tail next to you, giving you
Yeah.
love. I mean,
Yeah.
so they're not holding on. And so the idea is to let go of your attachment to what you're seeing or what you're
Mhm.
observing,
Yeah.
right? See it. I mean, in a way, it's like life says to us, everything in life, whether it be a leaf on a plant, because I'm taking care of Dr. Bob's plants right now in his house, right? And so I sing to the plants and I talk to the plants, and uh, they want attention too, right? And everything wants, just pay attention to me. It's
Yeah.
like, give me that attention, that thoughtful attention, that loving attention, and everything's good. I mean, then I'll blossom. I'll show you my flowers. Like
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's beautiful because
yeah,
everything's alive.
yeah.
It's amazing. I love this. I'm so grateful for this conversation. There's so many I'm excited to go back to this because you've said so many things that I believe I needed to hear, and that's one of the things. I know I do the podcast, and I feel like I have these healing sessions whenever I have beautiful souls like you come and share your light with people. And so I'm just so honored that you have taken some time out to share your gifts with the world, which are still in the process. You've only just begun, and I'm excited to be able to see you again. At the end of all of my podcasts, I always like to ask a special question to my guest. I never know what the question is going to be. So, based on our conversation today, I just would love to ask of you, what would be one what would be one message that you would like to just give to those who you have worked with, or those that may be gifted to work with you in the future? If there's anything that you'd want to always be able to leave them with through your sessions that can help them to ground in the magic of the shadow work, what could that be for them, to remind them that their whole shadow or no shadow, and yourself included? What would that grounding message be?
Well, a very simple, quick message would be: don't give up.
Mhm.
Um, you know, keep on keeping on.
Mm.
Um, you know, uh, courage and the the courage to move forward has magic within it, and um, yeah, like for myself, I would say, just like, I'm 71 years old, right?
Wow.
So I've still got energy that makes me want to just continue on like I'm still a young man, and
Yeah.
um, so I wouldn't let age in any way hold you back. You can always tap into the grace of who you really are, and um, yeah, and just trust that. I mean, it really is about, the universe is not against us; it's for us. It's
Mhm.
everything. Look at what we have all around us. I
Yeah.
mean, in Mother Nature, we have been given everything that we need, and
Magnificent.
yeah, yeah. So like, and go to nature. That's another thing.
Yeah.
Spend time in nature. I was just recently on Victoria, on Vancouver Island, and when I stepped into those forests, oh my
Oh,
God,
wow.
they were literally talking to me, the trees. I mean, it was like I stepped into a cathedral of of the tall ones, of these amazing trees, and
Mm-hmm.
the energy that's coming up. Like I step in there and I would literally feel like this hug, like this, I was being embraced energetically.
Mm-hmm.
Nature, sit by if you're going through troubled times, sit by a river that's flowing and throw all of your concerns into that river and watch the tide go down that river and watch your stuff going down the river.
Mm-hmm.
And then listen to the peace that the sound of the river gives you as it massages your thoughts into peace, into a more calm perspective. So everything in nature is for us. It's there for us. And we've just become a little bit, maybe more than a little bit, too distracted by our human ingenuities and inventions and cities and all of that technology.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, all of this stuff, none of it's bad if it's used in a way that's for good. And so,
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
This is amazing. Thank you. I could hear the river as you were talking. I'm literally like, wow, that's pretty powerful. I could actually like hear the river with the rocks and the beautiful. It's beautiful. So Tru, I would love for you to share, where can we find you? Are you open to, also, you're still working with one-on-one sessions. So can people reach out to you, share your music, share how they could work with you, anything that you have coming up, please?
Sure. Again, I'll just admit that I'm not the greatest of businessmen in terms of promoting myself. I do have a YouTube channel, which I've shared the links with
Yes,
Diane.
I will put those in the show notes.
Or Lucy, I should say.
Yeah. I know. Between you and I, we have an alphabet of names.
Yeah.
We have a whole orchestra. A whole bunch of personalities.
So I'm also on YouTube. Like Lucy's got all the
yes, I do.
The link stuff, and I'm sure she'll share that stuff.
Yeah.
And also my email is Tru Guy, TRU Guy, GUY @protonmail.com.
Brilliant.
So if that's because if you go to my website, which is truguy.com, you will find that you can't actually purchase my album. PayPal's been having some different.
We'll get you all set up with that as well too.
So I'm in a process of trying to get that set up. But if you want to contact me, just send me an email.
Love that.
And we can follow up in any way that you're feeling you'd like to move forward.
Amazing. And do you have any events coming up that you're going to be performing? Because you do quite a few.
I am doing a little house concert event here, actually in this home right here.
Wow, cool.
On March the 16th.
Amazing.
And, outside of that, I'm doing some other things that are coming up, like in May. I'm speaking at the annual Unity of Calgary convention or whatever it is.
Oh, wow. That's beautiful.
Yeah. So
that's amazing. And now could we also follow you on social media outside of YouTube? You're on Facebook, Instagram, anything like that?
Yep. Yeah, I'm on Facebook.
Yeah.
I am on Instagram, but I haven't done anything on Instagram for quite some time. I have about 900 posts up there, but I stopped.
Amazing.
I stopped putting things up there like a couple of years ago or so.
Yeah. No problem.
Couldn't keep track of all of these.
I know there's so much distraction.
Distraction.
Yeah, I love it. Well, thank you for taking some time today and sharing your heart. You're such a beautiful, wise, just energy. And I'm just really grateful for the messages that I received today, and couldn't be more blessed to have you on the Lucy Smiles Living Room. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane and Lucy. We'll just call you all the names.
All the names. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a real gift for me too, to be here with you. So
it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. And thank you to all of my beautiful audience who take the time. I love your feedback. I love the messages that I receive, how these conversations have been really very impactful for you on so many different levels. And so I would love nothing more than if you can share this conversation. You can catch it on our YouTube channel and all of the different podcast platforms, Spotify, iHeartRadio, all of the platforms are available. You can go to my website at lucysmiles.com. And absolutely, I will be putting all of Tru's information in the show notes. And I would just love if you reach out to him privately. The work that he does is so epic and so important right now. And you just never know when it's time for you to maybe tap into your own shadow work and have the opportunity to work with Tru as well. So until next time, my message, as always, is follow the magic that ignites your inner essence, and we will catch you next time. Thank you.